Anything Goes is the title song to a fabulously successful Broadway musical from 1934. It is without question one of the most daring set of lyrics to be approved by the Board of Censors at that time. In an earlier podcast, we looked at the lyrics to Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love. As we noted, Porter had to revise that song before the Board of Censors approved it. Amazingly, Anything Goes, which is more explicitly controversial, was approved without revision. That is remarkable, since the Board of Censors was much more active in 1934 than it was in 1928. In 1934, there was something of a conservative religious revival going on in the country, which was in part the result of the Depression. If you've taken American history and know anything about the Great Awakening of the 17th century, the 1930s religious revival is an extension of that. So, one would think that a song like Anything Goes would not be approved for performance. But by 1934, Cole Porter was a big name. He had a lot of stature in the music industry. He didn't have in 1928. So it's my guess that the Board of Censors didn't feel like they had the clout to censor what was going to be the title song to a big Broadway show. Okay, the first stanza is the verse of the song, the introductory part of the song that sets the context. Times have changed, and we've often rewound the clock since the Puritans got a shock when they landed on Plymouth Rock. But today, any shock they would try to stem, instead of landing on Plymouth Rock would land on them. Many things shocked the Puritans when they landed on Plymouth Rock: the climate, the topography, the Indians, the wild animals, and all the rest. But those were nothing to the shocks the Puritan would find today. And if those Puritans tried to stem or correct any of those shocking things, they would not succeed. Things are so topsy-turvy today that those Puritans would find that instead of landing on Plymouth Rock would land on them. So now we enter the refrain. In olden days, a glimpse of stocking was looked on as something shocking, but now, God knows, anything goes. Good authors, too, who once knew better words, now only use four-letter words writing prose. Anything goes. The world has gone mad today, and good's bad today, and black's white today, and day's night today, and most guys today that women prize today are just silly gigolos. A gigolo is a sort of a male version of what we used to call a kept woman. A gigolo is a young man who is financially supported by an older woman to be her escort and lover. It's a word that was common in the 30s, but not so much anymore. So though I'm not a great romancer, I know that you're bound to answer when I propose. Anything goes. When Grandmama, whose age is 80 and nightclubs are getting matey with gigolos, anything goes. When mothers pack and leave poor father because they decide they'd rather be tennis pros, anything goes. You know, that is the one allusion in this lyric that I have never been able to figure out. I'll bet there was a well-publicized case of a woman leaving her family to become a touring tennis pro, but I've not yet found a reference to it. Admittedly, I haven't looked very hard, and one of these days I'm going to do that. If driving fast cars you like, if low bars you like, if bare limbs you like, if Mae West you like, or me undressed you like, to molest at night, nobody will oppose. When every night the set that's smart is indulging in nudist parties in studios, anything goes. Well, my goodness. Those are two of the most shocking stanzas to get through the censors. Mae West was a singer, an actress, but mostly a 1920s sex object. Here's a 1920s picture of her. She was controversial for her sexually daring material, though we wouldn't find it very controversial today. As a side note, I do believe that the phrase blonde bombshell was first used to describe Mae West. Now we come to a few stanzas that are seldom sung anymore. They contain allusions that would have been hilarious to a 1934 audience, but which are lost on us. When folks who still can ride in jitneys find out Vanderbilts and Whitneys lack baby clothes, anything goes. There's a whole story behind this reference. I'll try to tell it briefly. Gloria Vanderbilt, who later became famous for her designer jeans, was born into a fabulously wealthy and notable family, the Vanderbilts. But her father, a railroad tycoon, was an old man when she was born and died when Gloria was 1 year old. The child was left with $5 million, and the child's mother was in charge of the money until Gloria turned 18. Well, the mother came from another wealthy American family, the Whitneys, and the Whitneys wanted some of that money. So they went to court and charged that the child's mother, whose name was also Gloria, was unfit to be a parent. The trial was a dream come true for gossip magazines. There was all kinds of name-calling and explosive testimony that was plastered in headlines week after week in the tabloids. There's nothing that poor and middle-class people like better than watching the rich suffer. Among the accusations was that the mother didn't even put clothes on the child, just let her run around naked through the Vanderbilt mansion. As a footnote to all of that, Gloria Vanderbilt grew up and made a name for herself in the design industry, and you might have seen her son on TV. He was the CNN correspondent turned talk show host, Anderson Cooper. So, if we just knew what a jitney was, we could figure out this stanza. A jitney is a very cheap taxi. Here's a picture of one. It's a shared taxi. And of course, in the Depression, people didn't have much money and tried to get around as cheaply as possible. So now we see the humor in the stanza. When folks who still can ride in jitneys, poor people, find out Vanderbilts and Whitneys, very rich people, lack baby clothes, anything goes. The next stanza is equally funny, but requires also a knowledge of the time to understand. If Sam Goldwyn can, with great conviction, instruct Anna Sten in diction, then Anna knows anything goes. Sam Goldwyn was a big-time movie producer. He was Polish and spoke English with a very broken accent. It was hard to understand. But he was even harder-headed. Here's a picture with one of his famous quotes, a line which indicates how hard-headed he was. Well, about 1930, he discovered a beautiful young Ukrainian actress, Anna Sten. And he brought her to the United States and was going to make her a star that would outshine Greta Garbo, whom we had a reference to in You're the Top. Sam Goldwyn's assistants objected, saying, "But, Mr. Goldwyn, she can't speak English." He famously replied, "Then I'll teach her," which was a great joke, of course, because he could hardly speak English himself. By 1934, when this song was published, Goldwyn had featured her in 2 films, and they were both great flops because Anna Sten's English was so poor that people couldn't understand her. Just think of those shocks you've got, and those knocks you've got, and those blues you've got from that news you've got, and those pains you've got, if any brains you've got, from those little radios. Radios had been around for a number of years in 1934, but they'd been big console jobs that sat in the living room. By 1934, portable radios were just coming on the market and becoming popular. And then the last stanza I've given you. So Mrs. R, with all her trimmin's, can broadcast a bed from Simmons, 'cause Franklin knows anything goes. In 1934, Franklin Roosevelt was still a relatively new president. The country was still getting used to his style, and more particularly, the style of his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, who is referred to as Mrs. R in this stanza. Eleanor Roosevelt is now considered to be one of the great American women ever, and many people liked her at the time, but many people didn't. She was the first lady to take an active role in public affairs, and she took a very active role. She was not at all attractive. Here's a picture of her. But she was a champion of the common people. She championed the cause of African Americans. She went down into coal mines. She visited army hospitals. She visited underfunded schools. She was out there and outspoken. She kept up a daily syndicated newspaper column and a weekly radio broadcast. One of her sponsors was Simmons Mattresses, and Eleanor Roosevelt made a few of her broadcasts reclining on Simmons mattresses. Well, some people loved her for her courage and independence, but a lot of conservative people in 1934 still felt that the woman's place was in the home. They regarded the president, Franklin Roosevelt, as being henpecked and run over by this loud-mouthed, aggressive wife. So with that in mind, when we read the stanza, it's funnier. So Mrs. R, with all her trimmin's, can broadcast a bed from Simmons, 'cause Franklin knows anything goes. There are many other stanzas to this song. Some of the ones I've shown you seldom get performed anymore because audiences don't know what they mean. This is a quintessential Cole Porter song. It's a catalog song in that it catalogs allusions. I'm not keen on harping about subjects and themes for these popular songs, but this song is about social behavior, and the theme is anything goes. That behavior today has no limits, no boundaries. Of course, that wasn't true in 1934 or any other year, but it fit the Cole Porter pattern of challenging middle-class morality and values.